Good evening. I would like to call the Fairmont City Council work session to order. The city clerk would do a roll call and members, please.
Mayor Bolliard.
Present.
Councilmember Rice. Councilmember Moran.
Here.
Councilmember Horton.
Yes.
Councilmember Wade.
Here.
Councilmember Weber.
Yes.
Councilmember Soul.
Here.
Councilmember McDaniel.
Here.
Councilmember Newsom.
I make a motion to excuse Deputy Mayor Rice. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Moving on, we have one item, consideration of work session business is the Housing Needs Assessment Study presentation. So I'll look to our city planner to introduce our presentation this evening.
Mayor, members of council, thank you very much. Chase Trade, Director of Planning and Development. Tonight we're talking and getting a presentation about our housing needs assessment that was just recently completed by Bowen National Research. This project was made possible in part by funding through the Cultivate grant that the city had received from the West Virginia Community Development Hub, with the city then funding the remainder of the study that was needed. So this firm here if you go look at their portfolio, has a pretty wide array of work and has done studies on numerous cities in West Virginia and within Appalachia in our region here, including Huntington and many more. So with that, they had placed in for an RFP to the hub, now with the city collaborating on it, and Aaron Hager with the planning office leading that project for the city. And what this will be and what we'll go over tonight is looking at what really are the gaps currently in our housing here in the city of Fairmont. So where are we falling short in terms of the different types of units or price range and other elements that we need to take into consideration. I find this to be timely for two reasons, and to keep that in mind as we move forward over the next year or two. One is that we have a number of large housing projects that are currently being proposed. It's been quite a while since Fairmont has had large-scale housing developments being proposed in our municipal borders. And so this is good information for us to have in mind as we are making decisions about those projects and how they're meeting the needs of our community in the future. The other part, though, is we have just begun our comprehensive plan process, and we're in the process of negotiating the contract with the firm who will do that work for us. Many of the things that are in this housing needs assessment will be put into that comprehensive plan as part of our goals for the city, including how can we do policies or initiatives and so forth in order to address the gaps that we have in the housing here in Fairmont. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Patrick Bowen, who's here with us from Bowen National Research to walk you through the study and hope you understand it in layman's terms much better than even I could. So thank you.
Thanks, Shay.
Thank you, folks, for having me. Again, Patrick Bowen of Bowen National Research. Probably spend just about a half hour presenting. I'll try to go a little faster. Certainly, if you have some questions along the way, you can stop me. Let's jump in. By the way, you had enough rain, Columbus, Ohio. This is unprecedented. So, and I'm sure for a city dealing with a lot of issues, makes it difficult. All right, so this is a study of Fairmont itself, but I didn't want to just look at the city because obviously what's in the rest of the county plays a role. So you're going to see references in that first bullet point to PSA. It's primary study area. That's Fairmont. So if you see a table, a graph, whatever, right? When I say PSA, I'm talking about the city. And then the balance of the county, Marion County, is the SSA. So you're going to see the two together, kind of compared to how they're each affecting each other, which one's growing more, which one has a higher concentration of a certain group versus another. We have a lot of demographic and economic information. I'll tell you what, I'll just hold it too. How about that? Thank you. Demographic, economic information. It's a housing study, so obviously we have a lot of housing information, both rental and for sale. And we looked at a lot of other things, and I will give the city staff, planning department staff credit. You all had a limited budget, but you were ambitious in what you wanted. And so what we were willing to do in our initial meeting, I said, look, if you can help me get some of this stuff, instead of us collecting certain information, I will get it in the report. I will comment about it. So your staff really came through and gave us a lot of good information to help us do some of these extra things. And I'll talk about some of them in this presentation. And as Shay said, that next to last bullet point, we come up with these housing gaps, rental and for sale. And then we'll show you at different affordability levels. So the lowest income households to the highest income. We also have community input. A very small number of stakeholders participated, but I'll still tell you what they told us about the local housing market, and then we have some recommendations at the end. All right, so real quick, I just want to show some population characteristics of the area. The black numbers are Fairmont. The red numbers are the state numbers, just to kind of give you an idea. And some of the things like, those that don't have a high school diploma, your percentage is lower, so that's better. Those with a college degree is higher, that is better. Unmarried, pretty close. Poverty rate, very close to the state average. Minority share, very close. So this is a quick snapshot of the population. What I'm going to focus in on is the households. So meaning the people that live in a housing unit. So it could be a single person by themselves. It could be two roommates living together. That's a household. A family of 5, that's a household. So we're going to talk about households because households drive housing needs for the most part. So this is overall household growth trends 2010 up through 2030 or projected out to 2030. You declined between 10 and 20, and then you kind of stayed stable in the last 5 years. And you're projected to really stay pretty much stable through that period of time. So with that said, a lot of people that don't understand housing may look at that and go, okay, then we don't need more housing. You do, and I'll show you the other things that contribute to housing needs. And this is just breaking out Fairmont versus the rest of the county as a whole in West Virginia. And I just marked off on the right-hand side. You do have some growth in each of these areas. It's just small. But again, there's other things that drive demand. And the state overall is expected to lose a lot of households over that 5-year period. So that, just the fact that you're holding steady is better than a lot of West Virginia is doing in terms of households. All right, so I looked at a few different things for households. This is one of them. This is a change in households from 2025 to 2030. The city numbers are in the dark blue. The rest of the county is in that royal blue. Where are you expected to change? It's that 35 to 44 age group, 45 and 50. I'm sorry, that's 35 and 44 for the city, and then you have the 55 and 64. It's one of the bigger ones for the rest of the county, and then both of the county, balance of county and the city, are expected to grow in that age 75 and older. You got a lot of older people here to begin with, and just much like the nation, you got a lot of baby boomers, so that's where all the growth is. So that's obviously going to affect some of your growth. And again, those middle-aged folks, that's not that common. Obviously, the rest of the county is not even having growth in that 45 to 54 age group. So you do have some of the middle-aged or older millennials here that should expect it to be increase. That's going to add to the demand for certain type of housing. But it's really that senior one I want you to keep in mind as we move forward with this, because you've got a lot of seniors aging in place here. And as they do, some will need some type of housing to downsize into. Not all of them. They're going to want to stay in their homes as long as they can. But certainly that's something to be thinking about as you think about future housing needs. This is renter household projected change 2025 to 2030. Again, lower income households on the top, higher incomes at the bottom. The dark blue is the city, royal blue is the rest of the county. Where's all your growth expected? Again, the dark blues, it's in that $50,000 or higher, really up to about $150,000. So you're going to have some of these moderate to higher income renter household growth. You're going to need additional housing for those folks. One of the things I caution people on is when they see the decline in the lower income households, in this case, those that make less than $50,000 here in the city. That doesn't mean you don't need more affordable housing. You do. I'll show you what people are living in, some of the challenges they face in terms of being able to live in good quality housing. But nonetheless, these are going to drive some of the changes and needs for your future rental housing stock. And this is the same thing for owner-occupied housing. Where's all that growth? Most of it's in that $100,000 higher, even some in that 75 to 99 range. So again, it's going to drive demand for moderate to higher priced single-family homes or whatever somebody ultimately decides to build. But you're also going to need some first-time home buyer homes. I'll show you what you have in terms of that product here in a little bit. All right, so one of the other things we look at, because again, if it was household growth alone, that's all how you measure need for our community, I could study the whole state of West Virginia and give you every county's numbers in 30 minutes. I mean, it's that easy to show household growth. So there's other things that we need to understand. And so in this case, I marked Fairmont in that top row there. In the green is the age of the product. I'll show you later your for sale housing market or your owner occupied housing stock, some of that, how old it is. But nonetheless, the bulk of your product is pre-1970, so it's much older. And then I have in here overcrowded housing. meaning people that live in units that are genuinely overcrowded. The units are too small for the size of the family that's in them, over 100 of those. And then you've got, even, believe it or not, you've got people living in units that lack complete kitchen or plumbing facilities. So you have about 147 of those. So you've got a lot of people living in housing that's lower quality. They're housed, but is this adequately housed? And so as the community thinks forward of what do we do about housing and helping our residents or future residents, certainly the overcrowded and quality of housing play a role in that. So 121 of your households live in these overcrowded units, 147 live in these units that lack complete plumbing or kitchen facilities. All right, so another thing I look at is what are people spending towards housing? So I put the definitions at the bottom. These are federal definitions. So in red, I put housing cost burden households. These are people that pay over 30% of their income towards their housing costs. That's considered too much. But maybe the bigger one and more concerning one is that orangey yellow color, those that are severe housing cost burden. That's people that pay over 50% of their income towards their housing cost. And if you're thinking about economics, the health of a community, the more people spend on housing, especially those that spend more than half of their income towards their housing costs, that is less for them to spend in your stores, your restaurants. They don't have disposable income. So these are people that are really significantly challenged. You've got 924 of these severe cost burden households. So a lot of people struggling financially. Again, they're housed, but are they adequately housed? And what does this mean for the community and its well-being and its residents? And as I said a second ago, for your economy. I thought you might be interested, where do people come from when they move here? So I marked in red and on the left-hand side of that first table, that's inflow. So where are they coming? They're the adjacent counties, no surprise there. Where are they going when they move out? It's the adjacent counties. The bottom table, I just wanted to put this in here to show you real quick. This is, again, I highlighted here in this peach color or tan, what their incomes are. So these are people moving into there and they come here, they're taking jobs. What do they earn? Most of them are making less than $25,000. I suspect part of that is the college, right? You got a lot of kids that are coming in, they get counted. They're wage earners, they're considered residents, at least for the time period that they're here for school. So that's a big part of it. And then people that make between 25 and 50 and older are more. So you do have this, again, I think the students are kind of skewing some of your numbers. I showed you before, though, the household income numbers, renter household income, owner household income, where the growth is, and it's going to be those moderate to higher income household. But nonetheless, people are coming here and taking these types of jobs when they move into the area. This may be something that you're not familiar with, and this is the map on the left-hand side, that dark green arrow pointing into the city. You have about 8,300 people that commute into the city every day for work. And again, there's many reasons why people wouldn't choose to live in a community. It could be taxes, it could be schools, it could be their doctor. I mean, many reasons. But you have 8,300 people that commute into the area for work every day, and they earn the income in this community. But short of them buying lunch or running some errands, getting gas, they're taking those earnings out of here. They're taking them out of your city to spend back home. I don't know this for a fact, but I suspect it's true based on 10,000 surveys, people we've surveyed in other markets around the country. Many that are just like the Fairmont area. A lot of people don't move into a community, even though they want to. About 30 to 40% of the people we surveyed have said, again, it's not here for Fairmont, we didn't do that here, but 30 to 40% in other communities, when we asked them, would you move to the community that you work in if you could, 30 to 40% say yes. So I suspect a lot of these 8,300 people that are commuting in would move here if you had the housing. But I'll show you what you have in terms of housing here in a second. Most of these people that commute in are in that 30 to 54 age group. Most of them are really good wage earners. They're making over $3,300 a month, so that's about $40,000 or more a year. So these aren't people coming in for low wage paying jobs. They're coming in for some of the better wage paying jobs, but they're just taking the earnings out of this area. This is commuting patterns. Where are people commuting to and from? So this is showing people that are commuting in the area. Harrison County, Monongalia County are two of the big drivers, obviously, for people that commute in. But I noted at the bottom, this is the distance people travel. You have about 16%, which is a little bit low compared to some other communities, but 16%, over 1,600 people, are traveling over 50 miles a day each way. So you got a lot of people traveling a long distance, and with gas prices in particular right now are very high, you can see the toll that this can take on a commuter, and this also impacts your businesses too. Again, we didn't survey your businesses, but I can tell you from probably over 1,000 businesses we've surveyed in the last couple years, employers are telling us this is a problem all over the country of people traveling long distances. They're getting a lot of turnover of their staff because people can't sustain these long commutes. So I suspect this plays a role here in Fairmont as well. All right, what do you have to rent? So what my staff did was we called multi-family apartment, so the bigger apartment properties in the area. We surveyed 5 of them. Again, you may have some others, but these were the ones that we could get a hold of and answer our questions. And I broke it out by these affordability levels. So it's tax credit, so it's like moderate to low income, and then subsidized, which some can operate under 2 programs. But you also have government subsidized, so that would be the lowest income households for this area. Very few available, 5 out of that 387. I marked this here for occupancy rate, 98.7. So almost full. You don't have much available. That's good for owners of those properties. That's not good for the health of the community. You normally want to be about 94 to 96%. You want some vacancies, right? As people's lives change, they get married, jobs change, people coming to the area. So again, with only 5 of these available, you could see if you had some of those commuters that were commuting in of modest income, especially those that travel long distance, they don't have a lot to choose from. And I'll show you what other rentals you have here in a second. Look at the rest of the county, though. That's one of the reasons I wanted to show you what's happening in the balance of the county. 552 units, they're all occupied. So the balance of the county is playing a role of what's happening here in the city, too. Right? Because they don't have vacancies. So somebody's trying to find something in this whole entire county somewhere. The only choices they've got left, and there's not many, are within the city of Fairmont. All right, so I did one other thing in terms of rental. So these now, setting aside the apartments, we look at what we call non-conventional rentals. So in the title I put up there, what is that? It's houses, duplexes, mobile homes, a unit over a storefront. Anything that's not an apartment, I want to know about it, and what do you have? And so it actually makes up almost 3/4 of your rental stock. So you have a lot of these. This is the bulk of your rental stock. What I did here is showed you, my staff's really good at what they do. They found about 44 of these, and this is looking online, making phone calls and things like that. So those 44, and this is just in the city of Fairmont, those 44, when I compare it to all the rentals, all these non-conventional rentals in the city, it comes back with a vacancy rate of 2%. Again, I said you want to be about 4 to 6. So even this side, even though you got 44, which is much better than those 5 apartment units, you have 44 of these available, it's still well below where you want to be. And even the rents, these are just the regular rents, average rents. This does not count utilities, so you could throw on a couple $100 for a lot of these units. And these really are over about $1,000 for a lot of, $1,100 for a lot of these rentals. So these are not affordable to a lot of the people that live here. And again, proportionally, you just don't have a lot of these available. How about your for sale market? So in the blue, it's the number of homes sold each year. Kind of steady. This is a little bit different than a lot of markets we look at, especially when interest rates kicked in 2022 and 23. We saw a lot of markets where that volume just dropped. Now, one of the things here, it did drop a little bit, but not much. But this is what happened around the country, right? Home prices for a little while kind of stabilized, and then a lot of markets started to see this increase again. You are much like many of the markets that we see around the country where these home prices continue to climb. So you've got your home prices, median home price of what's been sold has gone up $39,000 in just a matter of 4 years. So it's a pretty big increase. That's good news for developers, investors, people that have homes, things like that. But again, a lot of folks' incomes aren't climbing that fast, and so it makes home affordability a challenge. And then I wanted to show you here just the breakout of the homes that were sold by these different price points. And again, the dark blue is the city numbers, the royal blue is the rest of the county. Most of those homes are under $200,000, even a big bulk of those are between that $200,000 to $300,000 range. You haven't sold very much priced over $300,000. And I don't think you have very much available. And you would say, well, a lot of our residents are lower, moderate income households. Maybe we don't need that. Well, what did I show you in one of those earlier slides? Where's all that owner household growth? It's going to be those moderate to higher income households. So it's coming. That type of housing is going to be needed. And right now you don't have a lot of this higher priced product that's been sold. I'll show you what you have available here in just a second. And here we go. So this is available inventory. First off, put on the left-hand side, you have 28 homes that were available. Is that a lot? Is that a little? So those 28 homes, if I compare that to all your owner-occupied housing units, you have an availability rate, which is like a vacancy rate. It's 0.6%. Where do you want to be? I put up there, just like the rentals, you want to be within a certain range. For sale housing, you want to be about 2 to 3%. Look how far below you are. You're at 0.6%. So really low inventory in terms of what's available to purchase. And then I did it by price point, right? Where are these homes? A lot of these under either $200,000 or even under $300,000. Very little of these higher priced homes for upper management executives. Again, your growth is going to be among those higher income households. Many of them making over $100,000, meaning you can afford about a $300,000 home. You've got 5, right? You don't have a lot of these. So it's going to be a housing product that is needed as you move ahead, but you really need a little bit of everything. So one of the things I wanted to dive into a little bit to understand, okay, well, you have these homes that are under $200,000 or under $300,000. What are these homes? So out of the 28 that were available, 25, so almost 90% of them, were built before 1970. All right, so you got a lot of older stock. I said that in one of the very first slides I showed you about your age of your housing stock. So the same is true for what you have available. I wanted to cut it again, and this is not in the study, but I wanted to see for this presentation, well, what is this stuff? So out of the 28 total, but 25 that were built prior to 1970, look where this stuff is. It's really pre-1950, and even over a third, is pre-1930. So you've got homes closing in on 100 years of age, and some of it is affordable. But there's a reason it's affordable, right? Because it's just older homes. It's not universally true, but a lot of older homes have challenges, right? With maintenance, repairs, weatherization, right? Insulation or whatever, roofing, all those kind of things. So a lot of times there's challenges with these. So yes, you have some housing stock that might be affordable to lower to moderate income households. That could be their first time home purchase, but there's things that come along with that they may not be able to afford. Again, repairs and weatherization, things like that. All right, this is one of my favorite, maybe because it's bad news, but I do this in every presentation. And so let me show you what I have here. So I had to break this into 2 slides. I couldn't fit all of them here. These are the top, I picked 35, top 35 occupations for this area. And so I marked the very first one just so that we can pay attention to that one. So we looked at all these occupations. Again, we didn't randomly pick them. These are your top 35. Cashiers, what do they make at the lower quartile, meaning the bottom fourth? About $22,000 almost. At the median, $23,000. What can they afford to rent? Anywhere from $548 for those lower quartile people, or at the median, $576. So mid 500s. What can they afford to buy? Lower quartile, $73,000, median, $76,000. If you see anything in red, and you see a lot of red here, these rents generally don't exist in your market. Home ownership. I think your median list price of what's available is $245,000. Well below this. Now, this is just one wage earner. And so I know and we all know this, right? There's probably more than one wage earner, a couple, maybe even 3 wage earners in a house. But what this tells you is, because it's in red, and in some cases these are so far below what people can reasonably afford in this market, means you better have a second income. You better have somebody else earning a wage close to what you can do. And even take these. This is, again, we'll take the cashiers. All right, you'd have to more than triple that before you can afford. So if you had somebody making $23,000 and their significant other also made something close to that, double that, right? So you're at $150,000 roughly. They're still well short of what they can reasonably afford. So you can see rentals are a challenge. I'm going to show you the next slide. It's a little bit better news, right? A little bit more black in here for some of these occupations, but still a lot of red. But home ownership's the one that's really tough for your workforce. So again, we didn't survey your employers, but I will tell you this, and I'm pretty confident, when we've surveyed a lot of employers around the country, well over 1,000 in the last couple years. And so when we start to show this and we have the conversation with employers about this, they echo this problem, right? Because it's their workforce. They can't attract workers. They say, hey, come to my company. I'm going to pay you this wage. I think it's reasonable. But they're going to look at the market and go, well, what can I buy? I don't have too many choices. And what I do have, I can't afford it, right? And so that is an impact on your local employers. I suspect if we had surveyed them, we would hear the challenges they're facing. So we don't have to do a survey to probably give you some sense of comfort or confidence that your employers are probably struggling with retention and attracting employees. And I will add this. When we did this survey of employers, again, in other markets pre-COVID, there was a lot of employers telling us we were having a tough time attracting people. Then COVID hit. And remember, like that first year after COVID, well, COVID was in place really in 2020, 21, all kind of news stories about nobody was wanted to work. Employers were having problems, getting people to come to their businesses. And so that took off in 2020 and 2021. And that's still a problem today. The one that's changing, and I suspect it's true here, it's retaining workers. That's now becoming a problem because some of it's those commuters traveling 50 miles, but some of them are your local residents. They're here, but home prices are going up, rents are going up, and so it's hard for them with their wages maybe not keeping pace to be able, and other cost of living increases. It's hard for the local workforce to continue to stay where they are. And so I would suspect that's a challenge for your area as well. All right, this is one of the things that we did that we weren't under contract to do, but again, Shay and his group helped us out. And so they gave us some properties they were aware of, whether it was a vacant property or a vacant parcel or a vacant building. Then I just found out today I was getting confirmed because I wasn't sure. I think about half of those was our staff finding stuff. So even though this wasn't in the contract, we tag teamed this together. I think this is a good understanding of you have at least 17 properties that have the potential to support residential development. I suspect there are more. So we list the properties. We have what they're zoned as, their square footages, if it's a building, the acreage, if it's just vacant land. And so we have this information. We map them all. Why does this play a role? Well, one, you do have some sites, and there are some communities we go into. They're built out. They just don't have any available sites. But two, one of the things you can do as a community, you can market this study. You can show developers, look, this area has sites. Come look at the Fairmont. Here's some data points that say there's a need, there's an opportunity, there's potential for development. But we also have some sites here. Come and explore the Fairmont area. So I think it's a valuable piece depending on how you all move forward with this report. We're asked to look at foreclosures. This is county level only. So you can see where you were pre-COVID, right? Much higher. It slowed down during COVID because of some of the restrictions on foreclosures. But you've never gotten back to where you were. So that is good news. I will say that, again, I have not looked closely around at the country's numbers, but I'm reading tons of articles, and I suspect you are too. Foreclosures are starting to climb around the country. So I would watch this to see if this is a significant issue. We were able to break out 2025 numbers for Fairmont. So you had 14 of these foreclosures. Again, when I look at your entire housing stock, that's a foreclosure rate of 0.3%. That's low. About 0.5% is kind of the national average. So you're below that. And then in Balance County, it's even less. 16 of those foreclosures, and it's 0.1%. So foreclosures right now are not a major problem. It's something I would keep an eye on, especially if economic issues or housing market issues, home mortgage interest rates, those kind of things start to change. All right, another thing that we did that, again, we weren't contracted to do, but again, Shay and his staff helped us out. So on the left-hand side, you've made a lot of progress. You've demolished 168 units or housing structures at some point since 2012. I think a lot of that in the last, 3 or 4 years, I believe. Probably some of that's ARPA funds or whatever that helped do that. Nonetheless, you've removed a lot of poor quality, uninhabitable structures. So you've made some progress. You still have some work to do. Again, these are your numbers. 59 of these homes or housing structures are still classified as blighted structures within the city limits. And I marked what neighborhoods and where they're most prevalent. Now, one of the things, and I don't know the answer, Shay, I don't know if you want to answer afterwards or whatever, these are what you all classified as blight. And I suspect, if I'm correct, this is the bad buildings, right? Bad classification, blighted, abandoned, dilapidated, bad. All right, so those are probably very bad condition homes. One of the things I would think you might want to think about doing is, and we've done it before, so we can guide you guys or help you guys or whatever, but we've done where we just drive the streets and inventory blighted homes, where it's like we just see the exteriors, but I suspect your true number of what might somebody calls blight is higher, meaning the roof shingles are missing, the siding is gone, some windows are boarded up, all these things, but people are still living in the structures. So you probably have homes that are in poor condition, and why you want to know that, even the ones that are not in serious, you do want to know the serious disrepair, which is what you have here. But you want to know the ones that are on their way, right? You want to catch them before it gets bad. So you want to be able to understand, are there pockets within the city where we've got homes, they're not blighted, but they're on their way, right? Because if you can head that off now, it's going to save money in the long run and keep those neighborhoods propped up. So, and again, I have that in my recommendations of looking at blight. All right, so again, very small survey, so I wouldn't give a ton of weight, but nonetheless, I still wanted to point out what were stakeholders telling us. Some of you may have participated. So no surprise, there's common issues, housing affordability, that's in every market we go into. What kind of homes are needed? Home prices under $200,000, rentals under $1,000. Repair and renovation, it's a major priority, but people still commented that new construction is important. Availability of land, as well as some financing issues are a common barrier. This is it's so basic, and yet it's so common. It's public-private sector collaboration. If anybody thinks the government's going to do this on their own and fix all the housing issues, they've underestimated the problem. But the same thing for the private sector. I think a lot of people think, well, the private sector is going to fix this. If you think that, you really underestimated the challenge. What else I got? Okay, and then the housing gaps. So the rentals are on the top, for sale housing is on the bottom. Lower incomes are over here. Ignore the percentages up there. Those are tied to housing programs, so that would mean something to some people. But here's the household income range, right? Less than $44,000. What's that mean in terms of rents? $1,100 or less. That's the gap. So as you see, as we go up, higher incomes, higher rents, you can see the difference in needs. So really, the bulk of your needs are for households that make less than $71,000 a year, can afford a rent of roughly $1,800 or less. Then home ownership, it's flipped. Not a huge need for lower income, there's still some, but not a huge need for some of these lower priced homes under $240,000 roughly. But where's the greatest need? It's right here, and this is the sweet spot for the city. It's at $237,000 to $355,000. Total gap, again, $643 rentals, $551 for sale. Total gap of almost 1,200 units. Okay, so that does not mean build 1,200 units, right? That's not going to happen. What this does mean, because keep in mind, some of this is new construction that will solve some of your issues, but some of that is just people living in housing. I showed you before, they're housed, but they're not adequately housed. So some of this could just be home repair, renovations, and things like that. So you could invest or incentivize or do those kind of things to try to support home repair efforts. And some of this is just people that are struggling financially. I showed you those people that are severe cost burden households that pay over half their income towards their housing costs, struggling mightily with housing. So some of that could be, and again, this is not necessarily the city's role, but getting housing choice vouchers, things like that might help subsidize rent. So there's things that can be done. So that does not mean build all these units, although you certainly could, and that would solve everything, but there's many ways through this. All right, this is the last slide other than my contact information. So recommendations that go into some detail within the study itself, but now you have these housing goals, you have these numbers, I showed you those gaps, you know where the priorities are, lower income versus higher income, rentals versus for sale. There's even information in the study about seniors versus families and things like that. Affordable workforce housing is important. Obviously, I showed you your workforce and some of the challenges they have with being able to afford to rent or buy. I talked about your aging base of seniors. That's an area that should be focused. We showed you the sites that you have. That could be something that could be marketed. There's some really cool things I've seen cities do with that. Blight mitigation, again, you're making some good efforts with dealing with your blight, but could you have a more formal plan and inventorying, like I said before, stuff that's not quite reached the true blight level. So things like that you can do. Again, this wasn't necessarily, we do have a little bit about student housing in the market, but watch the student housing market. You do have some older stuff. We did drive around that area. So quality of housing is certainly an issue, and some of that's not being maintained very well. Another thing you could think of doing, I'm not aware, I don't think you guys have any kind of housing commission or coalition or anything like that, do you?
We have a housing authority.
Housing authority, which is different. Okay, so I know a lot of communities, again, this depends on what you all want to do, but a lot of communities will organize, whether it's a mayor-appointed task force or it's just some kind of housing coalition where citizens gather, people that have interest in housing, developers, investors, whomever, the housing authority, others can join, create some kind of housing task force. But that would really help in terms of trying to start having someone periodically update the community on what are our housing issues, what are some of the solutions. Because the worst thing that could happen is you spent money on this study. I'm going to present here today, right? We're wrapping this up. You know there's a need. You knew there were challenges, but I gave at least some numbers to it, to some of this stuff. And that's kind of the end, right? Nothing happens. So you have a chance here, especially if you had some kind of housing group that started to facilitate some of the conversation. I can help you figure out how do you organize, who's part of that. What else did I have in there? Oh, and this is being proactive in terms of trying to attract development partners. I'll make this promise to you. I assume you would want me to do this, but nonetheless, I will do this. And that is we work with a lot of developers around the country, a lot right here in West Virginia. In fact, your state deadline for tax credits is this Friday. And so we work with a lot of developers that do projects here in West Virginia. I am going to talk all about Fairmont. I'm going to give them the study. I want people to know about this area. But the city can do its role too. There's really, and again, I can show you some really cool stuff. I can show you organizational things that communities have done. Again, it could be something like a developer day where you bring developers in. I've seen some communities do that, and it is incredibly successful. So we can talk about that, or I can answer questions if you have something about that. But I hope that y'all are proactive in trying to get developers to be here and show them there's potential. Because again, this isn't the city's burden alone. The private sector can play its role. And then we're doing it here tonight, that last one, expanding and supporting education outreach efforts. Again, there's a lot of material you could put out to show the community we are looking at housing, we are soliciting input from the citizens. That's something you want to do. But this is part of the process here tonight. This is talking to you all, making sure you're up to speed on your housing issues. Again, I probably told you nothing that you didn't already know, but it's just now you've got numbers to see the depth of some of the challenges. And again, some of those folks are housed, but are they adequately housed? And so that's a conversation you all are going to have. And with that said, I will answer any questions you have.
Mr. Bowen, is there any way you could get us a copy of all of that?
We'll provide the full copy of the report was provided to you all in your email, and then it's also on the city's website. But the slides will also provide that to you all. We'll get the slides to you.
David.
Yeah, David's got those slides.
Okay. Yep. And let me mention this to you too. Doesn't happen often. I hope you take me up on this. Maybe it's just one of you. Call me. You got my contact information. Say, hey, Patrick, we're talking about this housing initiative. Where's the strategy? Have you ever seen that done before? Here's the good news. We've done over 100 of these studies. Some of them here in West Virginia, Morgantown, Charleston, Huntington. And so if you're like, hey, we're looking at this, I promise you there are communities out there that have gone through this. They're ahead of you in some cases, and some have made mistakes, right? But you would learn from their mistakes. But on the good side too is you'll learn from their successes. So if you say, Patrick, we're pursuing this, where do we go? Who do we talk to? I can get you in contact with somebody because they will talk because they keep helping each other, right? So there's help out there. There are tools. There are examples. You just got to figure out what do you all want to do as a community.
And I kind of had a question kind of tying in some of the data. And again, reading the full report, you just kind of touched on some of the high pieces of it. The report was very well done, and appreciate your team. And I know my team kept me abreast of the work that you guys were doing along this. I think I entered into it not with a high level of expectation, given it was only $10,000 that we had available to move forward with the kind of study. But I know my team told me we're going to get data that's going to be really important and valuable to us, and that's the case. But on the rental side, I hear consistently from employers, and in particular, whether that's the hospital that's continuing their investments in their facility, is kind of on the rental market, that we don't, and I experienced that firsthand. Grew up in this community, but when I was moving back, I have been a renter my entire life. So I'd never owned. I was going to purchase when I got here and ended up purchasing, but I also was kind of looking at, well, maybe I wanted to rent before I actually found the home I wanted. And the rental market here just was, in my view, very substandard.
Yep.
And is that a takeaway that you also viewed from this process as well?
Yeah, so that's a great point. So I showed you the multifamily apartments we surveyed. None of them were market rate. And I have no idea what your income was when you came here, but you'd have to have a fairly low income to qualify for either the tax credit housing or the government subsidized. So I suspect you're not alone in that journey of coming to this community and the challenge that employers face, where it's like, I want to offer Mr. Blosser a job, and I think it's a reasonable wage I'm paying him, but he looked and he can't find a place, so he's saying no thanks. You don't want that as a community. So there are things that community can do. It's usually more for the affordable stuff, but maybe it's affordable market rate stuff, so there's no program tied to it. But there are things a city can do to incentivize, encourage to get developers to come here. But part one is they got to know there's opportunities, and so promote this. And again, there's some really cool things that communities have done that I can share with you.
We had already started using the report with, in particular, as we've kept counsel, where some of the discussions around a couple of the downtown buildings at the upper floors, which significant square footage, not being utilized, and the information's been very helpful in that regard, having conversations with them. The other thing that I will say is, one of the things we were imminently concerned about was, folks on the city council are well aware of Fairmont Community Development Partnership and what its work was in the past, which was creating these affordable housing units throughout the city. And that work had been stalled for a number of years. And I'm very pleased that the existing housing that they had control over has been shifted to Augusta Development, which is a private, believe, and I may be interpreting it correctly, but I believe a private arm of the Fairmont Morgantown Housing Authority that allows them. And so they've taken those on, and their intention, they have several vacant lots. Their intention is to begin building units on those. So I'm pleased that at least that action's happening too, but the study has already kind of been beneficial for us even from the initial onset. So I can't echo enough thanks to your team, and certainly we've talked through our comprehensive planning process that we're getting ready to embark on, but other work is we've had a history sometimes of reports being done, and sometimes they get put on a shelf. Sometimes there's a reason for that, funding, lack of issues, but our intention around this is we see, whether it's investments from the hospital, investments that are happening in the technology park, there is a critical need here for continued investment in our existing housing stock, to your point, and how do we make that happen, but also how do we grow our housing side. And so we really intend to use the study, but also continue our relationship with you as well in this process. So I wanted to thank you for that.
Yeah, I appreciate those comments. I will mention this. I mean, if I was in charge of housing, and I understand you all have a lot of priorities, so, but if I was in charge of housing, I think one of the things I would do, and you made me think of it, and that is I would get employers to be part of the conversation. One of the things we've learned, again, pre-COVID, maybe right when COVID hit, and we would ask employers, are you interested in housing? Do you want to be part of the solution? And it was like 5% at best. Today, when we do those surveys, it's 25, 30%. Why? Because employers are starting to feel the pinch of housing. One of our biggest clients now is economic development groups. That was almost never. It was usually city governments or something like that. And now it's economic development. Why? Because they're hearing from employers, much like you just said, there's a problem. And we better solve our housing issues because then it'll affect our economics. So to me, I would get, especially a hospital or something like that, what role could you play as a major employer for our area? You're feeling the pinch of your staff not being able to live here, or maybe attract some of the staff you want to get here to work. Help us be part of the solution. Some it's minor, but even minor is better than nothing. Yeah. Sometimes it's a major involvement. A really quick example, I'm not saying that'll apply here, but I live just outside of Columbus, Ohio, Columbus Children's Hospital. You want to go look at what a hospital can do for housing. They turned their whole neighborhood around. Around the hospital itself. That was had a lot of economic disinvestment, houses deteriorating, crime, all these problems. And the hospital figured out, you know what, we can be part of the solution in our immediate neighborhood for our staff.
And I think you kind of just triggered me with that, because I think we're experiencing, so, we had, at one point, it was kind of devastating news. Our hospital was closed. WVU Medicine eventually stepped in. Initially, the facility that they were currently in, there were no plans to reopen it. It was going to be constructed kind of closer to the interstate. The hospital, WVU Medicine, ultimately decided, nope, we're going to invest in the existing facility. They've been investing significantly there. They're planning a new wing to the facility.
Good.
The growth numbers and employment numbers that I've heard from them are staggering from where the facility once was at, even in its heyday, from a medical services standpoint. And so from that expectation, I think to your point, they are a big anchor to that, but also one of our other drivers is like Fairmont State University. The number of personnel that are hired that we find are having to commute in versus staying here, but that you talk to would like to stay here. They just cannot find options available to them in order to stay here. It's not that they want to drive. Right. Honestly, they'd want to avoid doing that if they could. And so I think, to your point, really that employer thing is going to be something that I think we have to focus really big on, is bringing those employers to the table to be part of that discussion.
I mean, what a shame if all that investment for the hospital, right, and you aren't benefiting in terms of the workers being your residents. Yeah. Right, it'd be a shame that they take that money out of here, go spend it because they can't find anything here. So, I suspect.
No, I appreciate that very much, because that the workforce thing, talking with a lot of employers, that's been one of the things that I've heard the most is this issue, and you kind of highlighted it, that there's been a shift, and it really has been that I've seen a lot more focus on them, that because they're hearing it from their workforce as well, that I'd love to come work for you, but I don't want to commute in that far. I could talk at length about the impacts of employers I've seen around the country.
I'll make this offer to you all, if you wanted to, just to get a good understanding. I know you're talking to employers. I'm telling you from what we've learned from employers in other markets. If you all wanted to do a survey of employers through your chamber or economic development or whatever, I'd be glad to give you sample surveys, customize the question for you all, host the survey. If you guys get it out and do the reminder,
we accept that. We accept.
Yeah, and then we'll give you the results. And
again, if you're going to offer things, we'll take them.
It's the best budget for government. Right?
And I think our chamber president, Danny DeVito, would jump at this opportunity. So I think, we would be happy, because it seemed like that was one of the things, and you kind of highlighted a couple of times, that we kind of missed out on, was a little bit of that employer feedback standpoint. Yeah,
and it will even ask, to what level are you interested as an employer to be part of the solution?
I'd love to know
if
that.
we solved our housing issues, would you hire more? Critical things that I think if the citizens heard, because I can understand people have their resistance to housing, workforce housing. I get it.
Yeah.
Some of that's fair. But I think if they could hear from the employers themselves, like, hey, folks, we got a problem, and housing's contributing to our economic issues.
Yeah.
We can fix both. And so, anyway, I'll
I've already made a note. We've accepted your offer.
Okay.
I would be really interested to hear recommendations for communities that have housing coalitions that are creating effective change. I think it's one thing to put together a group of people to talk about housing, and it's a whole other to put together a group of people who can help create positive change in a community, especially if there were any communities our size-ish.
Yes. So if you remind me of my offer I just made that you've just accepted. If you just want to say, hey, Patrick, can we get some examples of housing commissions, coalitions? Again, I could put you in contact. I'll give you some really good ones that I really know well. And I know they'll talk to you if you said, okay, how did you start? What's your procedures? Who did you ask to contribute and help? So I can help you with that too.
I think the other thing, to Councilwoman Moran's point, it's hard for me. I know all these folks. Every once in a while I use a first name, and I'm like, not the appropriate setting for that. But you had highlighted the issue, and it's something that we've talked about. We've been very aggressive in our demolition program, as you highlighted. But we've been discussing over the last probably, I think, 2 fiscal years since I've been here, this conversation of how do we start not pivoting away, because there are still properties we have to deal with that are on that list that need to be addressed, but how do we start working to get properties from heading into that? And now, I mean, we've got a good program that I think is just getting started, so we don't know how that's going to go with Habitat for Humanity secured funding. But have you seen or have examples, potentially if we email, of other communities our size that have also kind of tried to deal with these issues of because a lot of times the problem is it may be an elderly person living in that house.
Yeah.
Eventually they want to downsize, and eventually they do downsize, but then it gets sold to somebody that doesn't continue to put anything in it, and then the house then becomes deteriorated, or the elderly person unfortunately passes, it gets into heirs, and then it just sits and it becomes a dilapidated structure, and then we're demoing it, versus a structure that really could have been a benefit and been a nice quality home for somebody in one of our neighborhoods. Have you seen communities or have examples where they've put together good, robust programs with multiple agencies to try to help those folks with housing repairs and things of that nature?
So I'm so happy to hear you say that, because that was one of my points too. We didn't officially study blight as part of this assignment, but we did. And so you've done a great job, and I showed you what you've done and what you got left to do, which is what you were just saying, but there's a piece missing. And one of the things we didn't look at was code enforcement. I have no idea how many people are dedicated to that. I have no idea how many code violations get filed and those kind of things. What level of detail? Sometimes some cities have some very good detail. So anyway, so there's some things we could talk about.
Okay.
Huntington, West Virginia. It's not that far from here. Huntington. Go look at Huntington. Remarkable at what they've done for blight. They've got multiple programs in place. They actually had us drive every street in the city, which, Huntington's decent size.
Yep.
And so they got a problem, bigger problem than you have. Again, we didn't inventory your blight, but I drove a lot of your streets. So Huntington has done a wonderful job. It's a great, at least role model to at least look at and say, okay, what might fit for us, and some of it might not. You don't want to, because I'm sure there's major financial resources put towards that effort, because they made that a priority in Huntington. So they needed to.
If we wanted to look at that data, is that something we could contract with you all around to do some of? Okay.
Yes, and Huntington's by just as a side note, I can get you the study so you can see what it is.
Yeah,
put you
that would be
the person that's in charge of their blight and its development in the downtown and things like that. But if you needed us to do something here more, we could certainly do that.
Yeah, that has been a primary focus area, has been trying to figure out more programming, which is part of our strategic plan, 5-year strategic plan as well, that we've developed internally. My goals with City Council that is looking at how do we start this pivot point and trying to figure out how do we keep houses from getting to that stage that, and again, to your point, I drive around the same neighborhoods. We have some really great neighborhoods in this city but some really great neighborhoods that have also had their fair share of a housing demo here and there. They may not have the same amount of housing demo in some neighborhoods, but there's been a demo here and there. And so that doesn't, there's no neighborhood that's untouched by someone not having the resources to necessarily be able to keep up with putting a new roof on, putting new windows in, dealing with heating and air conditioning issue, and those are all things that eventually lead, when those things aren't taken care of, water damage, things like that. Right. And sometimes it's the other issue that, and I'm concerned about in particular about the programming with Habitat for Humanity, is the income side, because those income thresholds, all due respect to where those numbers come from, and I get the reasons why for it, of setting certain thresholds to make certain money available to folks, but there is this issue for me of there's still people who would be considered higher than those income thresholds that wouldn't qualify for that type of assistance that still need assistance. They're putting food on the table, trying to pay for, the costs of things, and they still don't have the resources to take care of those issues, but we still want to try to see those addressed. And I think that is a lot of times the gap for me. So I feel like the Habitat program is going to address some of those issues around folks of, that have lower means, but I'm worried about that middle ground of folks that still maybe way above those limits, but are still low in comparison to having disposable income to deal with those issues.
Yep. We all probably went through this at some point, where it's like your neighbor cuts their grass, and so you're like, I should cut my grass, right? But that
Yeah.
same principle applies to home repair. I've seen it, right? Where maybe this community has a revolving loan home repair program, limited budget, but you put something towards it and you see a home get fixed. I've seen them people put money back into their own homes because like, okay, this
Yeah.
is worth my investment, because otherwise this neighborhood is declining, the street is declining. I'm not going to get my return if I fix up my house, so why waste it? And
Yeah.
I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to sell my house and be done. When they start to see activity, then they want to put something
Yeah.
back in their home. So it'll build on itself for sure.
Any other questions? Thank you again.
Thank you, folks.
No,
Yep.
thank you very much.
Okay, do I have a motion, a second, to adjourn our work session this evening?
Second.
Thank you. We are adjourned, and we will reconvene with our regular city council meeting